Welcome everyone to our third Kwajong event. My name is Victoria Caudle. I'm a fourth year PhD student at UCLA working on Korean literature, and I am a translator myself as well. The series Kwajong, celebrating the process of translating Korean literature, was created as a platform through which translators of new and important works of Korean literature coming out in English can make visible the deep consideration and skill that goes into their work. Thanks to the support of the Center for Korean Studies here at UCLA, we've been given the opportunity to yet again peek behind the publisher's curtain and learn more about how works of Korean literature are brought into English. The translations we'll be learning more about today are part of a collection of short stories by Pak Kyongni titled The Age of Doubt, which was released by Hanford Star this fall. This collection boasts 7 short stories, each with a different translator. Today we welcome two of the 7 translators and the editor of this project to share more about how this collection came together. I'll now introduce our 3 guests and our esteemed moderator for this roundtable discussion. Anton Her was a double longlisted and shortlisted for the 2022 International Booker Prize for his work as a literary translator. A graduate of Korea University College of Law and Seoul National University Graduate School, he currently divides his time between Seoul and Seongdo. He will publish a book on translation in Korea in 2023. As a translator and member of the Smoking Tigers, complaint of translators of Korean literature, many of whom contributed to this collection, I've had the great fortune to be able to call Anton a colleague and a friend who has supported me and so many others starting our careers in translation. Jeong Kim is a translator and editor based in Seoul. She won the Commemoration Prize of the 47th Modern Korean Literature Translation Awards in 2016. She's also a graduate of LTI Korea Translation Academy Special Section and Regular Course. She has translated literary and cultural content, including short stories, children's stories, essays, poetry, pansori script, scenarios, and subtitles. While I've not had the pleasure of meeting Jeong in person, her diverse experience in translation and her foresight to establish such a remarkable team of translators for this collection has left a deep impression on me. Dasom Yang is a writer and translator from Korea, now living in Berlin. She holds an MPhil in creative writing from Trinity College Dublin and is writing a collection of essays. Her translation of Pak Kyongni's short story appears in this collection that we're talking about today. I met Dasom when we were both participating in a translation workshop, and I've always admired her commitment to both literature as a translator and as a writer. Our moderator today is Dr. Hyun-Suk Park, who is an assistant professor of Korean literature at UCLA. Her primary field is Korean literature and culture from the mid-17th through 19th century, encompassing texts in Korean and in classical Chinese. Her research interests include intersections of literature and performance of music and dance, the history of gender and sexuality, the comparative history of slavery and ritual studies, travel writings, and cultural exchanges in East Asia. She is currently working on her first book manuscript based on her dissertation, The Government Courtesan, Status, Gender, and Performance in Late Joseon Korea, which examines the music and dance performance in state ritual and ceremony by government courtesans, female entertainers of hereditary base status. Welcome, everyone, and Hyun-Suk, please start us off.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction. We talked about it a little bit by email, but I guess we can start with the roundtable conversations with the translators. You can freely talk about the topics that you want, and then I will ask some questions afterwards and then moderate the Q&A sessions.
Yeah, I think it would be great to start with Jeong talking about how this project came together and how the translators were assembled to start building this project with Hanford Star.
Right. I think I have to tell you like what Hanford Star Publishing Company is doing. The company is a British independent publishing house trying to introduce great literary works of East Asia to English readers. So I joined the team last year, about a year ago, I guess, when Anthony and Taylor, the 2 co-founders of Hanford Star, were considering publishing a Korean female writer writer's work. So at that time, we had a few candidates on our list, but then as soon as we realized that none of the Pak Kyongni's short stories have been translated so far, like we felt, almost the, obligation that our next project should be about Pak Kyongni. So, Pak Kyongni is, the legend in Korean literature. Her most famous work is Toji, land in English. So it took about 25 years for her to finish the work. It's, it's 21 or 20 volume epic novel, like, periodically serialized in newspaper. So it's she's amazing. I mean, she's one of the most renowned Korean writer in the Korean writer. So, and the series Toji is still loved by so many Korean readers, and it has been included in the UNESCO collections of the representative works. So that's how I joined, the team of Pak Kyongni project. And this, the Age of Doubt project has a lot of significance, I guess. Some of the stories are autobiographical, and most of the stories center around a very strong female, very proud and strong female protagonist, and which is the embodiment of Pak Kyongni herself. They are either widows who lost their husband to the war, or and lost their son in an accident as well. And they also have to financially support the rest of their families. Or single women who always, justify men's prejudices and biased abuse, or suffer from some fateful love. So because a lot of stories here in this collection are autobiographical, some people may think that it sounds a bit rather, personal, but actually these stories also touch a lot of social issues like crumbling healthcare system and women's empowerment, and like the challenges to the patriarchy. So you can also have both like personal Pak Kyongni's aspect, and then the insight into the historical, feminist, and cultural context of those times. So this is kind of brief introduction about our project.
So from what I understand also, before this project, we were actually talking about translating Pak Kyongni on Twitter, because Dasom had mentioned on Twitter, I'm looking at it now, this is on October 24th, 2019, Dasom tweeted that she was working on a sample for Toji by Pak Kyongni. And I was reading the new Penguin Proust. I mean, it's not new now, but so Proust is being retranslated. I'm not sure if the whole thing is out yet, but I was reading it as they were coming out. Like Lydia Davis did the first one, and so I thought and the way that they did it was that each volume had a different translator. And Liu Cixin's Three Body Problem trilogy, A Remembrance of Earth's Past, interestingly, it has a similar title to Proust. It takes its title from Proust. So the Liu Cixin trilogy was also translated by two different translators. So I thought, well, this is something that this makes kind of a project like Toji more feasible. Although I feel like ideally it would be great if Dasom just translated all of Toji from beginning to end, like make it her life work. We're basically asking this young woman to sacrifice her entire life for one book. If Dasom isn't up for that, then I thought, oh, if we have a book like Toji, or if we have a book like Chemeng's Onward, which I love, then we should have, we can kind of like divide it up like they divided up Proust. And we can also, like, because I know that Toji has like a very strong financial foundation, that they might be able to like subsidize it, and we could kind of cobble together LTI funding and Toji funding or something. Like now we have, everything is kind of like, I was tweeting about that, and I quoted Dasom, and I was saying like, oh, everything is kind of in place. We know how to get funding. We know there's a group of great translators who love working together, Korean translators who love working together, and all we need is this one publisher that's willing to invest. It's even though they would be subsidized, it would be a huge effort on their part. Someone who's very dedicated to Korean and Asian literature in translation. And I tweeted about like how that might happen. And then Onward Star like slipped into the mentions and we're like, hey, this sounds like an interesting project. And I'm like, maybe like they were also thinking about doing Pak Kyongni for a while. But this was kind of like the first instance where I heard that Onward Star was interested in Pak Kyongni. And this was in, again, God, when is it? 2019, October 24th, 2019, almost 3 years to the day. And so I always thought, so I feel like Onward Star is maybe playing a long game where, you know, they want to do something really, really big, and it would be massive. It would be an incredible feat of translation and publishing to get this off the ground. It would be like Korea's Proust being published. It would be like, you know, Elena Ferrante at the very least, where, you know, that those 4 books kind of like created an entire industry. So yeah, it would be a huge deal, and I kind of feel like this is a pilot project for that, and we're kind of like trying to see if we work well together and if we take direction. I don't know.
Oh my God! I mean, I'm so surprised. Did you talk with Anthony and Taylor? I mean, we are actually discussing the possibility of translating Toji with the Toji Cultural Foundation. They have the copyright of Pak Kyongni's, you know, work. Nothing has been confirmed yet, but we expect some positive results. And as you said, you know, the Age of Dots project was kind of an experiment about like how we can work with multiple translators at the same time, because we wanted to be prepared for this grand project. So this is a really, really long-term project. And you know everything already, so yeah, this is so surprising. Yeah.
I'm just guessing because like this is not a thick book, and why are there 8 translators, right? So if you divide, you said there are 20 volumes. If you divide 20 by 8, you get 8 volumes of like Toji English from volume 1 to volume 8. So I think it would be a really amazing project to be a part of if it happens. And I'm telling you, if it happens, it would be historic. Like it would be absolutely be making history.
Right. And we also knew that Dasom, you know, had, you know, passion for Pak Kyongni's work, Toji, and before we decided to do this, and we got some, you know, some other translators also said, oh, if you're going to do Pak Kyongni, you have to, you know, definitely contact Dasom. But she was already on our list. So we were like, oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah. So everything working really well. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like just hearing from Anton and Jeong about how this project came together, it really is a prime example of the most like possible like most positive outcome that can come out of collaborative translation projects and in Korean literature, especially because I mean it really shows a kind of ecosystem that we're working with, which is which is one of my favorite things about translating Korean literature is the translators themselves, that they're, you know, so is that we are able to kind of have that kind of communication about like, you know, what we're working on, what we're interested in working on, and who's, you know, who has the resources to support that kind of project. Because for me, I mean, going back to 2019 when I was getting kind of more serious about translating Pak Kyongni, it was really like more of a pipe dream than an actual project that sounded feasible, because it was just such a gigantic project. I remember, I mean, I've always wanted to translate Pak Kyongni. I sort of always had this personal connection to her because of through my parents who really loved her work. And we've had this, you know, the first edition of Toji that came out that my dad had bought the entire thing. And it's very, you know, it's one of those books that were so well worn that, you know, the pages are kind of, you can really tell that they've been loved. And it actually has like his signature. He loves like signing his own books whenever he buys them. So like with the dates and like when he bought, where he bought them. Um, so when I sort of started getting more serious about becoming a literary translator, um, she was always on top of my list. And in 2019, so 3 years ago, I was in Korea, I was visiting, and I think it was Deborah Smith who told me about the Toji Foundation, that there is this foundation, you can go there. They actually have like a physical estate where, they've sort of restored the house that she used to live in and died in. And there is also what's it called, the residency program for artists, not just for writers, but for translators, artists, artists of all disciplines. And we sort of had this, she was based in Berlin at the time, and we were talking about how like we should go there, we should apply for the residencies, and we can, maybe we can look into this, the whole project. So when I was in Korea, I actually just I think I emailed them first, and they said, I don't know if they said that I could come and talk to them, or if I just showed up. um but it was this kind of, I guess I was feeling really, really sort of like eager to get this project going, and to learn more about where this was at, because it sounded actually a bit um odd to me that Toji had never been fully translated into English. So I went there, and it's in the foundation's in, is it in Wonju, I think, in Gangwon-do, not too far from Seoul. I took the train and I went there. Somebody from the foundation came to pick me up from the no, actually I took a cab or something like that. So it was sort of like, it was a bit hard to get to without a car. And I get there, and the impression that I got there was, I mean, it's this beautiful place where, surrounded by the mountains, and the Gangwon-do is, it's one of my favorite places in Korea. Um and the director there was really happy that there was somebody, who's seriously looking into this. But she was also, I think, just as not clueless, but she was just as kind of lost as to how this would sort of take off, because there had been an attempt to translate this, and I think first 3 books were translated, or maybe first 2, and then the third book was kind of, it had come to a halt, and then that was already like 20 years ago. And she sort of told me about, I think it was a translator who was based in the UK, and they had like, email correspondences between the foundation and the former translator, who had sort of told them basically, the publisher that had taken on the project earlier had sort of dropped the project in the middle, because of the vastness, and then and the sheer volume of the work and the commitment that they would have to make. And I think maybe in the beginning they didn't necessarily, you know understand the scope of it, or maybe the things have changed throughout the process, but they sort of, had to drop the whole thing. And they kind of, but they still, at that point, I think they had retained the copyright, so you couldn't necessarily like the foundation wasn't at liberty to release the copyright to other translate or other publishers. So it was kind of like at a standstill. And she was talking about how the work had been translated into Japanese, I think, fully. And there were interests in translating into other languages like French or Russian, and because Pak Kyongni had, she holds such a high regard in Korean literature in general. But the way that these translations work, and with the language like Korean, is that a lot of translations first are sort of funneled into different, like more different languages through their English translation. So they need the English translation is sort of, you needed to have that in order for it to be translated more widely and more kind of even like more quickly into other languages. Um, so yeah, I spent like an afternoon there sort of listening to her talk about the issues that they've been having basically with the project. and also there were some residents there that were very eager to talk about Pak Kyongni and like the stuff that they were working on. And there was a dancer who was sort of who had his project based on I think 김약국의 딸들, the other collection by Pak Kyongni, and they were putting together like some sort of a musical with the choreographer and stuff like that. And everything just sounded so. You could really tell that her legacy was just very much alive, and a lot of her work was or is adaptable to more contemporary contexts and what we do with our translations. And yeah, and it gave me a lot of ideas, but at the same time I felt there is really something out there, but it is a big project for me to take on by myself, and will I be able to say yes, like I'll take this on by myself and spend the rest of my life translating the entire thing, and we'll translate like one book a year and then finish it by the time I'm 50 or something like that.
Would you be willing to share the work with 7 different translators?
Of course. No, that's the thing. I mean, yeah, that was what was really amazing about it. Because like when I tweeted that in October, I kind of did that sort of as a, I mean, as why does anybody tweet? You just kind of like shout into the void. But Anton responded, and then it sort of started off this conversation, and there is a real, I mean, because even already by then, like Anton was, we were joking about how he's the BTS of Korean literature, and he, he had, you had the sort of the network and the resources already by then to sort of get the word out there and to see, if there were other translators or publishers who'd be potentially interested in it. And that's what exactly happened, I think, when Humphrey Starr got involved with the project. I mean, I know that Anthony and Taylor were, looking for ways to translate writers like Pak Kyongni. But yeah, I mean, the way that it came together and the way that, we've worked on this book together, I thought it's one of those rare things that, the way that we've sort of worked on it collaboratively without, working on the same story or without working on the same book directly, but kind of coming together and having sort of adding our own sort of voices and in the way that we've translated these stories, and that kind of meeting the 7 different translators through the book and thinking, we could possibly work on a much longer project together, and something that's as monumental as Toji, and yeah, it was really exciting.
I know that Anton, originally for Hanford Star, you came out with the Kangyongae collection, Underground Village, which you heroically did all on your own with all the research and everything that went into it. And hearing Dasom talk about how, this is a great opportunity to have this really interesting collaboration between multiple translators and create a voice, but with still individual tinges to each of the stories. I wonder how perhaps you'd say the process was different, or Yujong, how this collaborative effort was created. Did you have like a style sheet or something? And what I'd love if you talk about some of the really interesting choices you made, like keeping the say the sort of non literal phrases like 아이고 or 참. I loved seeing 참 in one of the short stories.
So basically, because we know that we are working with top-notch translators already, we didn't have many guidelines for them. We kind of let them, play on their own. I mean, we had a really, really minimum guidelines, like please use American English, just for the cohesion issues. And yeah, I think initially we didn't want to have footnotes in the collection, but then we kind of ended up doing that because, some of our translators wanted it. So basically, it was like, okay, do whatever you want because the reason why we wanted to work with 7 different translators was because we want diversity. These are distinctively standalone stories. Although the Age of Doubt and Age of Darkness sometimes they look like twin stories, but they are independent stories, and the rest of them are has very different voices, and we wanted to convey those diversities through our excellent translators. So we didn't have many rules to apply for them, and it was just a great honor for me to edit Pak Kyongni's collection. And then when I saw our translator list, that made my whole editing experience even more surreal. They are so good, and I would be the first one who read their beautiful translations. So I was really happy to work with them. And the editing process went like this. Personally, I first read their translation first, and then later on, I compared their translations with the Korean source text line by line, because I expected, this is none other than Pak Kyongni. Many Korean readers would be interested in this book. So as a Korean native speaker, I wanted to make sure we have, as few mistranslations as possible. So that was one of my focuses. And then actually, there were some other editors too. I mean, I covered all the 7 different stories, but then Anthony and Taylor also covered half the stories, plus the commentary I translated. So we were kind of 3 of us, we were a team. So we kind of discussed, some specific issues, whether big or small, before sending our suggestions to our translators. So we have like a kind of multi-layered editing process internally, 3 of us. We kind of, back and forth. What do you think about this? And then when we kind of reached a certain agreement, and then we organized all the comments and then sent, those comments to our translators. And then later on, we interacted with our translators as well. I think we repeated the back and forth, the 3 or 4 times at least, so that it was kind of dual process.
I just want to add that Jeong really elevated the translation. Certainly mine. I don't know about everyone else's, but with mine, I remember because it's all in track changes. You can tell who Jeong said there are several people editing, but you can tell who is editing what part. And Jeong's comments were always would always make me go, oh yeah, and then I would do what she tells me to, and it was just so nice to have an editor who had this really deep understanding of the source language and the source text, and someone who could really tell you why you are wrong. And I'm just really, really glad that we had Jeong for this project. And yeah, I hope she edits all of the future Onward Star projects from Korea, because yeah, it was just I mean, it makes it really, of course, the editing, it just makes a really huge difference, because Onward Star has always been very, very good with editing, I feel. And what she described as, letting diversity in and letting translators do what they want. I think that's been really, really evident, almost to a fault, because I always tell the story about, in Cursed Bunny, there's a story called The Embodiment, and I couldn't think of a title for for momhada. So, because it's a very Korean word. So I was like, I'm just gonna call it The Embodiment because it has the word body in it. And then I forgot that I had titled this, and then I sent the manuscript in, and then it came back, and Anthony or Taylor said, are you sure about this title? Because it's a little, I'm not sure if it quite fits. And then I was like, oh, I mean, it's the title means this, 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 and this. I was just explaining my thinking behind the title. I wasn't defending it, but that tone doesn't come across, in in writing. And so I think Anthony and Taylor were like, oh my God, Anton is really obsessed with this title, but let's let him do what he wants. And so when the book came out, and then I was looking at it, for some reason, it even escaped the fact that I was reading it in galleys and whatnot, because I was so obsessed with the text, and I was looking at the title. And then I looked at the title and like, oh my God, we went with this title? So yeah, so like almost to a fault, they're very they're very willing to discuss, edits, and very open-minded about like what is good editing, and like what they want. And I think this is really important, especially for aspiring writers and translators, to keep in mind that editing is not an imperative that comes down from above. It is a conversation process. And so when your editor suggests something, it's like when Jeong, whenever she was correcting things in my manuscript that were so obviously wrong that I did, even she wasn't saying like, oh, Anton, you're wrong. She's like, well, it kind of says this in the Korean, and then I feel like this would be a better way to say it, but it's up to you. Like, so it's like she always like put it in like a discussion form, so it kind of makes you aware that, oh, this is this is just input. You don't have to like follow what your editor says. And that's always been that was my experience in the editing process for this book, and it's been my experience throughout my other 2 books for Onward Star, and hopefully for all my future books with Onward Star that I want to work with if I die.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to echo what Anton had just said, because I definitely felt like it was a huge win for all of us as translators to have an editor who understands the source text and the language and the author so well, because I remember we had like a couple of discussions around certain like specific words or specific like nuances, because we're working with the stories that were set in the 20s and 30s, and certainly with a lot of their language, the way that they were using their language was certainly like influenced by the time before. It wasn't even if you're working with language in the 20s, that means that we were also working with the language from the 1800s that have been carried into language at that time. So yeah, I mean, even just having like certain like small sort of discussions around like one word. I remember we talked a little bit about, I sort of like hit a wall with this one word, plasma, like plasma, and they were talking about, my first instinct was like, are they talking about, because Sunyoung, the protagonist in my story, she's at this hospital and she's kind of recalling this experience when her mom went to buy it. The original text is something like 일제 플라즈마를 사러 갔다, or something along those lines. She went to get this Japanese plasma, and I thought, are they really talking about like plasma TV at that time? Like, did they have the TV? Like, was that possible? And sort of, I kept thinking about it, and then I asked my parents, and then they were like, I mean, that seems a bit unlikely, but maybe they're talking about like plasma as like 혈장, like in because we're talking about hospital, and they're talking about like getting the blood for her boy who's dying. But then like with the context, it didn't really make sense. So I think I just left the sentence blank, and then we started sort of between Anthony Taylor and Jeong and we sort of started guessing. and I think the way that Jeong weighed in with sort of she did this, she sort of brought in the perspective with research and sort of like letting us know that this actually was, they surprisingly enough, they had plasma TV back in that time, and with the context, we were able to kind of narrow it down to like a specific way of translating that word, and that was really fun, and sort of like knowing that there is a room for us to have these conversations, and knowing that there is somebody that I could sort of turn to for their expertise and for their like ability to for their like research sort of capacity. That was really helpful, and to know that in that way, that also felt like a collaborative process between the editor and the translators.
I mean, you guys are so good. So we kind of tried to make suggestions or some alternatives. We didn't want to push you, to choose whatever we are saying. But I think that worked really well. And I was always, amazed to, how you guys kind of came up with a lot better, suitable, expressions, more beautiful, ones that I suggested originally. So yeah, it was really good. I mean, sharing all the opinions. And I think one thing I found, something interesting during the editing process is like, as Victoria mentioned, you romanized a lot of Korean traditional terms. Like I remember from Dasom, like aguni or 장마, a lot of very traditional Korean terms, and 아이구 and aga, right? So some intersections too. So, and I think this is so beautiful. I mean, it kind of, adds some more Koreanness to our already rich collection. So, but this tendency I could find all, across, 7 different stories. So I think we didn't, push any cohesion in this matter, but kind of naturally it was kind of appeared. And then I really like that aspect.
I think it's really funny you mentioned that, because one of Yujong's suggestions for my story was I use porch for maru, and then Yujong was like, maru isn't quite a porch. It's maru is a maru, and then I was like, oh, I guess she's right. Maru isn't quite a porch, because then you think of like Little House on the Prairie or something. You think of porch. So I was like, okay, maybe I could. I don't know what I ended up going with. I either said maru or
Maru,
porch. Yeah. So we went with maru, and hoping that they sat on the maru and looked out at the yard. Like, so we're trying to, we assume that people are gonna get like what the structure is, and this influenced me because like I was God, what was I doing? I was doing final edits for not final edits, but final edits for the first draft of I Went to See My Father by Kyung-suk Shin. 아버지에게 갔었어. And like the word maru appears a lot in the Korean, so I was like changing every instance of porch to maru, maru. Like
yeah,
ended up like so Yujong's edit ended up influencing my other books as well. So that was like really funny and very cool.
Yeah, I love. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of using these proper nouns in Korean and romanizing them instead of translating them. Just not only for translations, but also for your own writing, because that was just one thing that sort of I've been very adamant about when I was doing my creative writing course. I just hated having to like explain in English and sort of anglicize certain expressions or words even. I mean, like, because even yes, like maru and porch, they conjure different images in your head. And it's, we have a lot of words that have been adapted from different other languages into English that we use with ease and with enough frequency to make sense of that. So I think I feel a certain obligation as a translator to propagate the uses of certain words, like because these are proper nouns that describe a very specific thing, like a hanok or like a Korean house, sort of certain structures. I remember when I was translating the word aguni, I thought, like at first, like, oh, traditional oven, or like, what is the word that would best describe this? And I was like, well, let's just go with aguni. And changma also, I mean, technically I could have said the rainy season or something like that, but it always, like, rainy season always to me sort of makes me sort of like, there's a huge association that I have with the word to more tropical climate, which is different from Korean climate. And I guess I got a little like nitpicky about certain like very small things like that, and wanted to just make sure. And I also personally really love the word 장마. So monsoon was not originally an English word, so but now it's been sort of adapted to English and we use it as such. So one day, we'll hear people, the laymen of English speakers, say, "Oh, we're expecting changma in Korea this summer," and things like that. And also, yeah, I remember we during my editorial process, we had I sort of made a point about saying, you know, I want to keep the word aga instead of like saying honey or like darling or other terms of endearment, because yeah, those are such like, you know, terms of endearment are such, they have such strong sort of cultural um colors, I feel like. And it just like I could not imagine the 1920s grandma in Korea saying darling or honey. Like it didn't really sit well with me. Um and aga, like the way that it sounds, you know, it's diminutive, but like with endearment, but also with like this like such like etitam with the subject, that you know you express such like intimacy with the subject. And um yeah, and I was glad that, you know, the Humford or the editorial team were, you know, open to that suggestion. And I was thinking when I was using, when I was kind of or like my logic behind that was, you know, you read writers like contemporary sort of American or British or any other writers who write in English, sort of bring these words into English, like certain, you know, I was thinking of Chimamanda Adichie, who uses a lot of these, brings in a lot of these terms, especially terms of endearment, because in different cultures you have so many different words that you use in order to like refer to people. Because in Korean also, because the way that Korean language is structured is that we really avoid like addressing each other directly, you know, by saying like you is not very common, right? Like you say either this person, like I would not say like, oh, 당신, or like, you know, that's always like a tricky thing in Korean, like literature or the translation, or like just even everyday speech. I would say like to Anton, like, you know, 안톤은, you know, 어떻게 생각해요? Rather than like 당신은 어떻게 생각하세요? You know, so that kind of like, and then the way that we refer to people, it's always very relational. You know, you would say like 선생님, or like, you know, 번역가님, or like 교수님, and or, you know, so you always need like the title of that person, or you need to kind of clarify your relationship with that person in order to know how to address them. And yeah, and aga is, in that sense, it's kind of a relational word, and sort of bringing that into translation without sort of losing that that essence, I think was important. And yeah, I think I've seen that throughout our collection with other translations as well, and that was really nice.
Yeah, I think it gives a great credit of intelligence to your readers that you don't need to flatten uh, the text for them. And I know Anton has specifically written against the mythical English reader, who you know, often translators are taught to smooth out a text to make it readable, but for who? I think this is a collection that really shows exactly what you can do by leaving in a lot of texture and a lot of cultural specificity.
It's interesting because a lot of reviewers have pointed out that this is something that I did for Love in the Big City. And they've been like, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. But there was like, I can think of one just Instagram review where they seemed like surprised that oh, there's so many things that were not untranslated. And then he went on to say like, I assume that this is because I don't read a lot of translated literature, and this is just a convention that they have in translated literature. And I'm like, yeah, bench. Anyway, so I agree that it is kind of becoming more of a trend to transliterate and not translate certain terms. I mean, obviously, I think that you can go the other way, but I remember like for Court Dancer, I very deliberately translated a lot of the place names, because the meanings that are inside those names, like I think Kyungsuk Shin would provide Chinese characters for them, and so I was like, oh, you want us to understand what these place names mean. So I just translated them into English. And once I did that, I could see why things were happening the way, like in the specific places that they were happening. And so you definitely do have to make a choice. But my advice always, as you know, when I teach people translation, is that like Dasom, you have to really think about it. Like, because Dasom was like, well, this is a term of endearment, so I have a very clear reason why I want to keep this in transliteration and not translate it. And of course, it goes the other way around. We're like, oh, why am I, instead of mindlessly just transliterating everything, like if you have a good reason that you can articulate that you want to translate something, then that's what you should do. But yeah, the point is translators should think, and a lot of translators don't. You know, we just do it because deadlines and all that.
Well, I guess I can chime in. Sorry, Dasom. Now, because we are getting some very related questions from the audience, so I guess we can continue this conversation with the questions. So I just want to read out the 2 questions from Amy Ross. I think any of you can answer them and provide some more related stories. Amy is asking, first of all, as you are working on this project, were there moments where you felt overwhelmed? If so, how did you overcome this? And I had a similar question as well. Pak Kyongni is known for dealing with a very Korean traditional culture and language, but also in the short stories, her writing style is very modern. But at the same time, I was wondering whether there was any particular moment in which you found any, overwhelming difficulties of translating some words, some phrases, or carrying a particular like sentiments that she wants to express in her writings. The second question from Amy Ross is, what are some key moments in the work that you hope readers really focus on or ponder that were tricky to translate and edit for Western readers? So these are, I think, related questions, and also you have been talking about these issues already, right? So I'm wondering if you can answer any of these questions in some ways and continue this conversation.
I can answer the first, and Dasso, maybe you can answer the second one. Did I ever feel overwhelmed? So I think you mean like overwhelmed by the reputation of Pak Kyongni and maybe like the content of the translation itself, of the source itself. And so first of all, I translated Kang Kyung-hye, and I've translated, I am Kyung Suk-shin's translator. And so for me, the reputation of a writer is kind of like, you don't really think about that when you start a work, I guess, because when you do, I guess you like what does that really get you? I think especially in Korean society, not so much in Anglophone publishing, but in Korean society, if you say that you're translating Pak Kyongni, then people are like, oh, 네가 감히, like, how dare you? Like, who do you think you are? You're translating Pak Kyongni? And I'm like, I've translated Kang Kyung-hye, I've translated Hwang Seok-young. Like, why can't I translate Pak Kyongni? And so that's how I approach it from that attitude, from an attitude of entitlement. So the thing is, I think what might have been overwhelming is, the fact that she's so different from who I am. But the thing is about that, as a translator, you find the path into it. For example, with Kang Kyung-hye, this is a woman who I'm not a contemporary with, and she's from a different part of Korea. But at the same time, I really felt like I understood where she was coming from, because she kind of reminded me of these all these heroines who who go to college, who are like go-getters, were very kind of very intelligent and very forceful, and not the demure shrinking violet, demure oriental woman trope that doesn't really exist in real life. Like, she was a very powerful woman, and all of her female characters in her books were also very powerful. And my mother is of that kind of stripe. So I was like, okay, so I understand this character. I'm going to pretend she's like my mother, and the really cool female sunbaes that I had in college, and I'm just gonna combine all of that. And also I needed someone in English, so I thought Pearl Buck is also a very educated woman who, did a lot of daring things. And so I'm going to combine the voices of these different women and do the translation. So once I had the voice, like I had everything. So when it comes to translation, I always say, you have to have a kind of sense of the voice, and you have to triangulate the right voice for it. For Pak Kyongni, I thought like she's kind of contemporaneous with Kang Kyung-hye, like not really, but kind of like they would have influenced, like Kang Kyung-hye would have influenced her. The political mindedness, the forcefulness, just the sheer courage, and the slight cynicism. Like I was like, oh, so, okay, so this is another voice that I think I can do. I think I can understand, especially my story. Like when I read Toji, it's not so much like that. Toji is a very different beast altogether. But for my story in The Age of Doubt, which by the way is also titled The Age of Doubt, I felt like this would work for this voice. Like, this is a woman who had horrible things happen to her. But she still persevered. And at the end, she definitely perseveres. So I think, yeah, this is, I have an in, I can hear her voice in English now. And then once you have the voice down, everything else you build over that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I would also, keep in mind as I continue on my path as as a literary translator. That's, to sort of like understand it's not really like translation isn't really about like being able to identify with the characters or with the writer. It's rather that, you kind of, and like what Anton has said about sort of the triangulating the right voice that you can sort of you can sort of pick out as what you can, what you recognize. I think that's important, and that was definitely helpful for me during my process of translating the story as well. I mean, my personal sort of struggle with the story sort of was a bit more, I guess, was a bit more personal, because I was going through, my mom was very ill during the time I was working with the story. So sort of seeing, it was oddly, because my story is about the sort of the mother son like relationship. In a way, she loses her son, and the sort of the way that it happens is also so brutal and so abrupt, but through an accident. And so like working with the story and throughout the end, yeah, I mean, looking back, it took me actually a lot longer than I thought it would to work with the story, because yeah, looking back, I think it took that kind of personal toll on me. But yeah, I mean, in a way, it's this the story is very meaningful in that way, because the way that it came out, and my mom just passed away this year, earlier this year, and sort of the book came out after she passed away, and so for a long time I actually couldn't go back to reading the story or the book, because it was sort of, it reminded me of the sort of the time that I was working with the story. It sort of collided with her illness and everything. So but then actually just being able to slowly go back to the stories and like reading other, Anton's translation and other the rest of the collection, yeah, was a process of personal growth as well, if I can say that. And so yeah, that was so it has that very like personal connection to me. And as for the key moments in the work that I hope readers would focus on and ponder, um, I mean that's also kind of what was really difficult about the translation, was that it is such a lot of the stories are very sort of very, not brutal. I don't want to necessarily say, but a lot of them are heartbreaking, and they're not happy stories as such. They're not, um they don't, a lot of them don't have happy endings. And the way that and I thought, oh, I guess because the question also asks specifically for the Western reader, a lot of the stories don't have the same kind of narrative arcs that a lot of Western stories do. And when when you're taking courses in creative writing, when you're always sort of, there are classic writers who you turn to for as a sort of archetypes of short stories, and Pak Kyongni's stories don't really have that, that kind of classic like Western narrative where it's sort of, you enter a conflict and then it gets resolved in the end, or things like that. And the way she ends her stories are often, she ends stories with images or sounds, but not necessarily with like this, with the resolution, or like with kind of telling you what has happened, or what you're supposed to, think or be leaving with. But I actually, that was, one of my favorite things about her stories, is that, it leaves you with like certain sensory images that, that kind of leave you with at a different place than you started with. And I mean, I guess I would maybe ask the readers to sort of focus on those moments where it feels a little more, or like sort of lean into those moments where you feel a little more alienated or a little more unfamiliar with with the story. I've also seen a few, maybe one or two reviews on like on Instagram, or was it on Twitter, somebody had mentioned that, they had a hard time sort of understanding what happened at the end. They wanted to kind of know more, but they were sort of left with this feeling of incompleteness. And I would say, I mean, that's the biggest, that's maybe the biggest charm of her stories, is that, and sort of like leaning into that, and seeing why that makes you uncomfortable, and sort of questioning that. I think it's a fun sort of, it's good like reading experience as well.
Well, thank you for sharing your personal story, and I'm really sorry to hear about your mother. And my own father is also struggling right now with very severe illness. And listening to you, I just realized why it was so difficult for me to read the stories, especially the two stories, The Age of Doubt and The Age of Darkness. So I was going to ask a question about the expected readership, and I think you have already answered pretty much about it already. But I was going to ask, what kinds of readership do you expect? And I was very much delighted and also surprised to see this translation, because I'm wondering whether Pak Kyongni is now widely read, even in Korea. And despite this precious presence of this woman writer in 1950s, my impression is that her writings are not, getting this attention that she deserves, especially the short stories, other than The Land, Toji. So I was curious about this choice of the writer over other writers. I know that you have a lot of experiences of translating more contemporary recent works. So as a reader and also as a translator, what was the most appealing points in the stories of Pak Kyongni? And what do you expect that about the responses from the contemporary readers, the readerships in the US or elsewhere, the English-speaking world?
I'm only known for translating contemporary work like literally in the past year. I'm actually known for taking on historic work that is very difficult to translate and that no one wants to touch. Like my first book was Court Dancer. Kyung-suk Shin had 3 translators before me, but none of them wanted to touch Court Dancer. because it's like a historical novel. And it has all of these like historic details that require a lot of research, and not every translator has the range for that. So no one wanted to touch it. And then I said, well, I remember like talking to Brother Anthony about it, and he was like, oh, it's just so goddamn long. I'm like, and so I feel like that's the kind of book that I'm known for. My second book was Kwajong Underground Village with Onward Star. So this book was written, you know, all the stories in that book were written in the 1920s and 1910s. And so that required a lot of distance to bridge. And then my third book was The Prisoner by Hwang So-kyung. And this was, you know, such a difficult book to do that Hwang So-kyung's original translator like just didn't want to do it. And so it was given to me. And that required a lot of research and a lot of just like, oh God, it's a huge nightmare. And so by the time I was done with The Prisoner, I was like, wow, F this. I want to do something light and breezy and contemporary. And the two books that I did was Love in the Big City and Cursed Bunny. So actually, this kind of work is my forte. And it's what I'm kind of, it's my area of expertise. Whereas, you know, Love in the Big City and Cursed Bunny, like the contemporary works are kind of like, oh, I did them for fun. And then they got, you know, longlisted for the Booker Prize. So actually, like, when I choose those works, I don't really think of the readership so much as like, oh, I just want to be challenged. I just want to do something really edgy and like really just interesting. I want, you know, I see like a very difficult work. That's why I'm so excited about like, you know, a potential Toji, because that is a lot of distance to bridge, right? That's a huge gap that you need to traverse in order to bring that to the English readership. And to make, you know, a work like this speak in a contemporary language, not just, you know, not just in its own language, but in a new language, in English, which is, you know, they say that Korean and English are the furthest two languages in the world. So we already have that gap to traverse. And then now we have like the gap of distance and culture to traverse. Like, you know, it's a challenge that if you are that kind of translator, which every one of these people are, it's a challenge that you're going to embrace. And like, when I think of like, when I think of translating works, my only concern is like, do I like it? In that essay that I wrote for Violet Phenomena, the conclusion is, you know, I'm the mythical English reader. I'm the most important reader. And so will I like it? Because I am totally convinced, and this is a very common sentiment that a lot of people in publishing have, it's not just me. If I like it, other people will like it. Other people will see that this is an interesting work, which is why whenever I put out a book, I'm just so excited about it. And I'm just like, I can't wait for people to read this. Like, I'm not concerned with like, oh, is there an English audience for it? Of course there's an English audience for it. You know, if I like it. And people keep asking me like, how do you predict what readers will like? And I'm like, I don't do that shit. Sorry, am I allowed to say that? No. Like, I don't do that, you know, like what I do is I want to surprise the reader with something that they didn't know that they will like, but end up liking anyway. You know, like no one can predict that a book like Cursed Bunny will exist. You know, they look at the cover of Cursed Bunny and then they read it and they're like, wow, this is such a weird book. I would never have imagined that this would have existed until I read it. And that's the kind of reading experience that I think most readers are interested in. Like, I don't want to be catered to or whatever, and most intelligent readers don't. What a reader really wants is to go into a bookstore, look down at all the books being displayed, and then discover a book that they had no idea existed until that moment. And there's no way to predict that, other than, you know, did I like that book when I found it? Like, did I have that feeling when I found it? And then if you're a good translator, you are able to convey that feeling of discovery in your translation.
It's exciting to see that The Age of Doubt has had, you know, Instagram reviews. It's had several TikToks about it. So it is reaching a young, or at least really engaged audience that is exactly as you're saying, just picking up something that they might have absolutely no connection to because it looks exciting and they fall in love.
yeah, it's like, it's so fascinating to me because like now I have publishers approaching me, Korean publishers approaching me with like properties that they have. And I'm like you're trying to game the system. You're trying to predict what people overseas like, or you're trying to clone Love in the Big City or clone Chris Bunny. And like, you can't do that. That's just not something that you can do. And, you know, I feel like authors understand this, like writers understand this, but publishers are kind of like Korean publishers, a lot of rights holders are kind of like understand it less.
That's really, really exciting. Great answer. Dasom and Jeong, do you want to add anything on this question of readership or?
No, I completely agree with what Anton just said, and yeah, and just in general, I think translating is a lot like writing your own book, in that you know, the way you kind of pick up a book, the way you sort of pitch a book, the way you deem a book worthy of translation and worthy of your time, worthy of other readers' time, really doesn't have so much to do with, you know, your understanding of the publishing world or your understanding of the readership or your you know, the the way you understand the dynamics between, you know, the trends and the dynamics of the publishing world. It is really about whether you believe in the work enough to sit with it through the, you know, through the time that it's required for you to translate it. And yeah, it was for me, it was a sheer sort of personal attachment that sort of got me through the whole process, and will get me through the process hopefully for the next, you know, projects of translating Pak Kyongni's work. And yeah.
I think there was a question about like, you know, any particularly difficult passages that, you know, we find translating or editing. I have one maybe I can share. It's actually from the era of fantasy, translated Mato. Because we struggled so much about this passage. You know, these stories were written in 1950s and 60s, and there was some very old vocabulary or some old concept. So, and especially because this is about the Japanese colonization, a lot of, you know, terms are from, you know, derivative from Japanese. But this was, okay, let me just read this. 단상에 오른 그는 억양없고 몸짓없는 일상의 현실을 하였다. 물론 최후의 승리를 다짐하고 믿어 마지 않는 내용이며 영미몰락의 예언이었다. 그러나 인간 수모에 극을 달리고 있는 전국에서 노후한 그만은 살아남을 것이다. 확실히 40을 넘은 잔류파 교직원이나 꼬마라는 별명의 총각 국어 선생님이 매일매일 붉은 종이의 환상에서 정전긍긍하고 있을지라도. So the term we were struggling with was 붉은 종이, red paper or a red slip. We were like, because this word came out of nowhere, it hasn't been mentioned previously. We were like, what is 붉은 종이? And 붉은 종이 환상. We struggled a lot. We were like, what is it? What is it? And then finally, Anthony, and we did a lot of research. Usually we do, but then Anthony realized it. He found the clue. It was actually a piece of document that the Japanese Imperial Army sent you for conscription. But we didn't know, you know, it's you had to do an extensive research to reach, you know, this answer. And there were some other examples. I think it was from Anton's Age of Doubt. You know, K, Money Landing Club in South Korea. Actually, K appeared, you know, across many different stories in this collection. And I know what it is, but I didn't know exactly how it worked because, you know, K used to be very popular in, you know, back in those times, but not anymore. Nowadays, people use credit cards and some other banking systems. So I had to call on my mom. How is the K working? And please tell me, like, you know, who is going to, you know, get the pot in the end, and what is the disadvantage of getting the pot earlier, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I mean, even to Korean speakers, there were a lot of, you know, cultural and very periodic, vocabulary and concepts across all the stories. And it was a really fun experience. I mean, doing research and calling up mom about, some terms. So yeah, I wanted to share my experience.
That is so funny about Kid because that is exactly what I did too. And I was like recalling all the things my mom would say about Kid because my mom would do it. And she'd be like, oh, I'm the last person on the K line, but that means I get the most interest, so it's all good. And then I would be like, oh, what if the Keju, like she runs away to America like they so often do in dramas. And yeah, it's and then I Googled, and then I would be like, how does K work? And then I Googled it and I was like, I just really, really studied it, but I still couldn't understand like exactly how it worked because it was so complicated. And I don't know how all of our foremothers did it because they must have been like, excellent math minds.
Well, you have been talking a lot about collaborative works already. We have another question about teamwork from the audience, so I want to read it. The question from Nella Katrapi. Hello and thank you. This is fascinating for me as the idea of teamwork in translation, for example, a bridge building can go in so many directions. So what are your views on exponential translation from Korean to English to another language, say Italian or any other language?
Like, I'm fine with it as long as I get paid. Like, as long as the bridge translator in the middle gets paid, like, I'm fine with it as a practice. Italian, though, there are quite a few. There are Korean Italian translators now. So I know one personally. So I think it's kind of less of an issue for that language. But if it's for smaller languages, then yeah, as long as you get paid. But even then, like if it's for a smaller language and perhaps a country that and a publishing scene in that country where it's not like they don't have a lot of funds, then I'm willing to concede translation rights for like $1 symbolically or whatever. If everyone is okay with it and the author is okay with it. And yeah, so it is something that but what happens more often in practice is I know for a fact that because someone told me that one of my translations is being used as a reference by translators into other languages because they consider it like the translation and like the kind of reference for the Korean translation. So they're just for their translation. So they're not just looking at the Korean text, they're looking at my text as well for a certain book that I won't name, but that's been like translated into several languages now. So yeah, I think it's cool. Why not?
Yeah, I think it also brings up important points about, the issue of acknowledgements and credit giving and who sort of benefits from bridge translations and who, and how that's sort of these kind of like credits and such get distributed in the translation process. Yeah, I remember Anton when you posted something or you tweeted something about how like in the German translation of Love in the Big City, they sort of just use the title Love in the Big City. They didn't translate the title into German. And they do that, in other languages too, where a lot of actually European languages, sometimes they just like prefer to use the English titles for whatever the reason, they think it sounds cooler or it sounds more fitting for that book specifically, or maybe they just didn't want to put in the work of finding the most fitting title in German or in other languages. So these things, I mean, I think, how you get credited or how you get, referenced and recognized, I think a lot of these things need to be kind of stipulated in contracts and translation contracts and yeah, and that sort of also brings up the important discussion around translators' rights and how these things need to be legally recognized and like stipulated in the contracts and Yeah, which are, being advocated by a lot of translators these days. And it's an important work.
Yeah, like I think every contract I have stipulates relay translation rights, like what would happen if it, like, I don't think it's ever been exercised. So, which is why something like that incident where the German edition of Love in the Big City used my title, because this is not Sang-Young Park's title, this is the title that I translated, Love in the Big City. It could have been like that title could have been translated in any number of ways. Like there was some Instagram user was like, why isn't this title in English like Cosmopolitan Love Story? And there were all these like, suggestions, but I was like, no, I want it to be like, that McInerney book, Bright Lights, Big City, Love in the Big City. Like I wanted to have like that echo. So and I do realize that titles are not copyrighted, and you can't claim copyright on a title, but just in terms of good manners, it would have been nice to be asked or even informed that, oh, hey, we're the German publisher, like we would like to use your title. And so thank you for doing what you, and instead of like me discovering it in the Instagram story of Sang-Young Park's Korean editor who happened to go to Austria or something, and then he was like taking photos of what he saw in the bookstores, and then he found that Love in the Big City. I was like, what? This is not because I saw the title and I was like, this is not a cover that I know. And then like, oh, it's the German edition and they're using the English title. I'm like, that's just bad manners. That's bad manners, Germany.
Well, it's interesting because I talked a little bit about this issue with Victoria yesterday, namely about the practice of translating Korean literature into another language by somebody who doesn't really know the Korean language, the so-called mediated translation. And I think it's related to the question of how flexible, how creative a translator's job can be. And I'm a scholar of classics, so if the translator omitted one single word or phrase, I would not really trust the whole translation. But in contemporary literature, you may have some different ideas on the practice, on the flexibilities or creativities of the translators themselves. So I'm wondering if you want to add any comments on that as well.
Like there are white translators who go around, exploring the work of translators of color who are heritage speakers of that language. LTI Korea expected me to become one of these, language servants, because when I was in LTI Academy, they didn't give me a fellowship. Yujong, they didn't give you a fellowship, right? So when you're an ethnic Korean and Korean citizen, like Yujong and I are, LTI does not give you a fellowship. They will for the foreigners who attend the program, for the non-Korean citizens who attend the program. So the messaging is very clear. You are not expected to become a literary translator yourself, but you are expected to be the language servant of these white people, basically. I mean, not all the foreigners are white, but that's definitely the expectation that LTI had at the time, and I believe they still do. So I imagine that it really annoys me that my career.
They actually offer scholarship for ethnic Koreans and Korean nationalities now. Not fellowship, but scholarship.
Yeah, they offer a tiny bit of money.
Yeah.
It's like $1 million. It's like $1,000 for an entire semester. So it doesn't compare to like, plane tickets. It doesn't compare to like the monthly stipend. Right. So they're trying to just like trying to save face or something with that. But until funding reaches parity for Koreans and for foreigners, like I don't see how they can justify me criticizing. Like I don't see how they can justify that stance, other than they don't expect Korean citizens like me to become translators. So I remind them of that fact every day, and I will tell anyone who, like, whenever this comes up, I'm so eager to tell people that the expectation is for me to become, a crib translator, for me to be the language servant while some foreigner uses my words to like make it palatable for their readership. And, and so this is part of why this question was so carefully asked and so sensitively asked by the person who posed it, because there is this kind of like miasma of this political issue around it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important issue, and I think I mean, I am all for, I think all of us are for you know, for to kind of enlarge the capacity of translator as a, you know, to have to take on more sort of authorial capacity and not be, you know, restricted to a mere sort of technical renderer of words, who, you know, through whom, you know, you sort of you insert words and then you kind of spit it back into in different languages. I don't, yeah, I don't believe in that, and you know, we're all for it, like creativity and flexibility of translation translators. But yeah, at the same time, it doesn't, you know, it's a really like, I think if you're a good writer, if you're a good translator, then you're a good writer, and that means, you know, understanding the way that the language works with within the context, or within the context, not just within the text itself, but with the relationship with the writer, the author has with the text, and all of that combined. So and having said that, I mean, it is, I think, also easy to sort of abuse that and say, you know, it's a sort of, or like certain white translators, or certain like people of translators who have certain privileges and access to publishing, have sort of abused that concept to say, oh, like this is a, you know, you know, to sort of make up for the lack of like full understanding or their full capacity as a translator. Yeah, that's definitely a political issue there, I think.
Yeah, certainly it seems like a political, very complicated issue. Well, we still have a couple of minutes. I just typed on chat, but we can still be accepting some questions. So please feel free to type them on Q&A. Before we end, I just wanted to ask you about your future plans. It's fascinating for me to see this group of young translators working together. And I was wondering, you talked about this Toji project already, but I was wondering whether you have any project for the future as a group or as an individual.
So I'll go first. Next year, they're publishing Kyung-Suk Shin's I Went to See My Father from Astra Books in the US and Weidenfeld and Nicholson in the UK in April. Duna's Counterweight, which is another science fiction book. It's wonderful and exciting. That I just got the covers yesterday, and it's a stunning cover. Counterweight is coming out, I believe, in July. It's supposed to coincide with San Diego Comic-Con. And I'm also translating what is arguably my first poetry book, which is in translation, which is Lee Sung-bok's Indeterminate Inflorescence, and that's coming out in September. I'm currently, I think, so Cursed Bunny 2, as Onward Story and I are kind of like jokingly calling it. Like, so that's, we haven't really discussed like when the release will be, but I feel like it will come out at the end of next year. But I'm not allowed to, I don't think I'm allowed to, but I'm allowed to say that, you know, that the contracts for that are signed, and I think they're signed. Well, they're signed on my end. So we are, so that is a go, probably. So we're looking at 4 books. Oh, Strangers Press is also publishing this series of short stories that I edited. And this is also by 7 different translators. There are 8 stories, but I had to translate 2 of those stories because I could not find a good translator for one of the stories. Very long story. like no one was available. Like, you know, Dasom is busy. Like it's like if you wanna hire, like, for example, a smoking typer, like it's almost impossible. There was like a period where it was like almost impossible because everyone had work. And so I'm amazed that Onward Star got, like, you know, Paige and I Morris and Sophie Bowman and like Emily Yamon, and like these are busy people. Like, wow, you managed to, that's a really great feat. So yeah, so I guess I have those five projects coming out. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm currently pitching a couple of books. I was really eager to work on the poet Choi Seung-ja, her nonfiction, creative nonfiction. I'm my next project. I really wanted to translate something nonfiction. Well, mainly because that's the genre that I've been working on for myself, for my own writing. And I've been spending a lot of time reading a lot of nonfiction. But I just found out that Chesenda, when she did her residency at at Iowa University for the creative writing program. I don't know, Anton, have you read that book?
Okay, so this is you're about to witness an extremely awkward moment. So I have the rights for that book.
Oh, you do? Oh my gosh. Okay, that's amazing.
But I would be very happy to cede them to you if this is the book that you were talking about. I was like, oh, which nonfiction Choi Seung-ja book, because I'm also doing a sample for that one. But if you want to do it, then I think I could see how that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do it, but
so we can discuss.
Yeah, we'll talk. Yeah,
Oh,
that's amazing. Because I just talked to the publisher. Was it? They're yeah.
Yeah.
Like
it's not a famous publisher, but yeah.
Nanda, I think.
Oh, it is Nanda. Oh, it is famous. Yeah, it's part of Monofilme. Yeah.
And they just told me that it's already been commissioned. They're working with another translator. So I was like, oh damn it! Like, who is it? I've been. Oh my god! Of course it was you.
Funny. This is so funny. Yeah,
that's so funny. I love that book, and it's so like I read it while I was in Korea this time, and I picked it up from a bookstore, and I just like read the entire book on my way back to Kunsan, where my family is, on KTX, and it was just like so great. Yeah,
it's really yeah. Okay, yeah, let's talk after this. Yeah.
Yes, that's great. And yeah, I mean, I just when I was in Korea this summer. Well, not this summer. What am I saying? Just the past month, and just going to a bookstore and just browsing through this. Just there's an amazing, sort of influence or group of writers that are writing the really exciting works. So yeah, I'm just focused on sort of pitching a lot as much as I can, but it's also in the process I've been finding out how active Korean translators are out there. It's just a lot of books are being translated, and I think it's going to be very exciting in the next couple of years to see a lot of younger sort of contemporary writers being translated, and yeah, specifically for like nonfiction, poetry. For fiction, I'm seeing a lot of sort of speculative fiction, in the genre of sort of like science fiction or speculative fiction. And I think Anton's work on Cursed Bunny really sort of like opened up that possibility, because science fiction and I think speculative fiction has always been a very big, very popular genre in Korean literature. I think the publishers overseas are also seeing, I feel that in Anglophone contemporary literature it's kind of gaining more popularity as well, and they're kind of turning, like, looking at Korean literature, seeing, oh, there's a lot of really exciting stuff happening there. So yeah, I mean, for me, nothing's been confirmed yet, so I can't like name books yet, but yeah, hopefully some announcements to come.
I already told you, like, we are talking about the possibility of Toji with the, Toji Cultural Foundation. So next Thursday, there is a Pak Kyongni 문학상 시상식. So Taylor and I are going to the ceremony and meet, the Toji people, and we can maybe discuss some more details about Toji project. And personally, I'm nowadays working on children's stories or some youth novels. So there is I'm not sure if you heard of him, Kwajong. He actually wrote over 300 children's books. He is really, really, I mean, elementary school students, they love him. So I was wondering why none of his stories have been translated. And since I'm interested in children's stories nowadays, so I contacted him. So we are talking about translating some of his books. So hopefully, yeah, I also have to pick for overseas publishers, but I'm still in the process of translating some of his stories. So hopefully it will work out well.
Thank you so much. I really wanted to read out the last question from Nella, but I think Anton already answered by typing. So I guess we can wrap up our discussion today here. Thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. It's such a precious opportunity to have these translators as a group and have this kind of conversation, and I really appreciate that. And as a general reader as well, I will be following up your future projects. Before we depart, I wanted to show the book once again, The Age of Doubt, which came out just in 2022, this year, from Hanford Star. Well, I guess I will be assigning this book in my classes, so the students should be reading. And also, I wanted to say thank you, Victoria, for organizing this event and this speaker series as well. This series, Kwajong, is sponsored by the Center for Korean Studies at UCLA and will be ongoing over the year. So please stay tuned. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.